For 15 years, James Harper's morning ritual had been as predictable as the San Francisco fog rolling over the bay. At precisely 7:30 a.m., he strode through the gleaming glass doors of Harper Technologies headquarters, a towering edifice of steel and ambition in the heart of the city's tech district. The lobby, with its polished marble floors and cascading indoor waterfall, hummed with the quiet efficiency of a company that had clawed its way into the Fortune 500. James would nod to the security guards, who never asked for his ID, not just because he owned the place, but because he made it a point to know every employee's name, from the maintenance crew to the C-suite. He'd grab his black coffee, no sugar, from the ground floor café and ride the private elevator to his top floor office, where the city skyline stretched out like a promise kept. But this Monday morning in October felt wrong. The air in the lobby was thick, not with the usual buzz of ambition, but with something heavier, like a storm gathering in silence. The barista Lily, who always greeted him with a smile and his order already prepared, fumbled with the espresso machine and avoided his gaze. The security guard, a grizzled veteran named Carl, shifted uncomfortably as James passed, his eyes darting to the floor. Even the elevator, usually a sleek cocoon of solitude, seemed to creak under an invisible weight. James sipped his coffee, the bitterness sharper than usual, and watched the floor numbers climb. Something was off, and it wasn't just the coffee. When the elevator doors parted on the executive floor, Claire Bennett, his assistant of a decade, was waiting. Her usual poise was gone, replaced by a tightness around her eyes. She clutched her tablet like a lifeline, her knuckles pale against the dark screen. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice low, "there's something you need to know." "Over coffee," James replied, moving toward his office. He was already mentally sorting through the day's agenda, board reports, a product launch, a call with investors. But Claire stepped in front of him, blocking his path, a rare breach of protocol. "Sir, it's about Nathan Brooks." James froze. Nathan Brooks wasn't just the head of financial analysis. He was the company's heartbeat. A brilliant mind with a moral compass that never wavered, Nathan had saved Harper Technologies millions by spotting inefficiencies and risks before they spiraled. He was the kind of man who stayed late to teach interns how to read balance sheets and send handwritten cards for every employee's birthday. James had once watched him spend 3 hours tracking a $47 accounting error, not because it mattered to the bottom line, but because it was right. Nathan was indispensable, irreplaceable. "What about Nathan?" James asked, his voice steady, but his pulse quickening. Claire's eyes flicked to the empty hallway, as if expecting eavesdroppers. "He was terminated on Friday evening. Security escorted him out." The coffee cup nearly slipped from James's hand. "Terminated? On whose authority?" CFO Langley signed the papers. "The official reason is theft of company funds." James barked out a laugh, sharp and disbelieving. "Theft? Nathan Brooks? The man who'd rather lose his job than fudge a decimal point?" But Claire's expression didn't soften. Her silence was louder than any words. "That's ridiculous," James said, his voice hardening. "Who authorized this without consulting me?" The board held an emergency session Friday afternoon. They claimed to have irrefutable evidence. Claire lowered her voice, glancing around again. "But sir, something doesn't feel right. I tried to reach Nathan all weekend. His phone's disconnected. His company email deactivated. It's like they're trying to erase him." James's mind raced. As the company's owner, he'd built Harper Technologies from a scrappy startup in a cramped garage to a global powerhouse. But success had come at a cost. He delegated daily operations to his leadership team, trusting them to steer the ship while he focused on vision and strategy. Had he been too hands-off? Had he missed something rotting beneath the surface of his own empire? "Get me everything," he said, His tone clipped. The termination papers, the evidence, the board, meeting minutes, and find me Nathan's personal contact information. Already done, Claire replied, handing him a slim folder. She hesitated, then added, there's something else. This morning, the entire financial analysis department is being restructured. New reporting hierarchies, new security protocols. They're moving so fast it's like they're scrubbing every trace of Nathan's work. James's jaw tightened. He'd always prided himself on building a company rooted in integrity, a beacon in an industry often clouded by greed. But now, standing in the sterile hallway of his own headquarters, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The folder in his hand was heavy, not with paper, but with questions. Why Nathan? Why now? And who had the audacity to move against one of his best people without so much as a whisper to him? He thought of Nathan's face, not the sharp, confident analyst who'd presented at board meetings, but the man who'd once shown him a crayon drawing from his niece, pinned proudly to his cubicle wall. Nathan wasn't just an employee. He was family in the way that only those who built something together could be. If someone had targeted him, they targeted the heart of Harper Technologies. And James wasn't about to let that stand. Claire, he said, his voice low but resolute, I want this kept between us. No one else knows I'm digging into this. Understood? She nodded, her eyes steady despite the tension. Of course. Sir. As James stepped into his office, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. The evidence against Nathan, the board's secrecy, the eerie silence in the lobby, it all pointed to something darker than a simple misunderstanding. He opened the folder, scanning the termination documents. Everything was too neat, too polished, like a script written to withstand scrutiny. But one detail caught his eye. The timestamps on Nathan's supposed theft didn't align with his badge logs. He hadn't even been in the building when the transactions occurred. James leaned back. In his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He'd built this company on trust, on transparency. Now, it seemed that very success had bred layers of secrecy capable of hiding corruption. If he was going to uncover the truth, he couldn't rely on his title or his team. He needed to get closer to see what was happening in the shadows of his own creation. He picked up his phone and dialed Claire's extension. Claire, I need you to do something off the books. Can I trust you? Always, Mr. Harper. Good, because I'm going to need you to find me Nathan's address. I'm paying him a visit. As he hung up, James glanced at the city below, its lights flickering like a warning. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to step into a conspiracy that would test everything he built and everything he believed in. The autumn wind howled through the suburban streets, rattling the bare branches of sycamore trees as James Harper pulled his sedan into the parking lot of a modest apartment complex. The folder of termination documents sat heavy on the passenger seat, its contents branding Nathan Brooks a thief, a claim James refused to believe. The drive from Harper Technologies' gleaming headquarters to this quiet, working-class neighborhood had felt like crossing into another world. Sodium streetlights cast long, jagged shadows across cracked asphalt, and the air smelled of damp leaves and distant chimney smoke. James checked his rearview mirror, a habit born of instinct rather than paranoia. The road behind him was empty, but the unease from this morning's strange encounters lingered like a bad taste. Claire had worked her magic, tracking down Nathan's address through a maze of disconnected records. The folder she'd given him was meticulous. Termination papers signed by Richard Langley, a board resolution citing irrefutable evidence of embezzlement, and a single page of transaction logs that didn't add up. James had built his company on numbers, and these numbers were lying. He zipped his jacket against the chill, grabbed the folder, and stepped out into the night. The apartment complex loomed ahead, a 3-story brick building with flickering hallway lights and peeling paint. A child's tricycle lay abandoned on the lawn, its red plastic faded to pink. James's polished loafers crunched on gravel as he approached Unit 3B. He knocked, the sound sharp in the stillness. No answer. He knocked again, harder, glancing at the darkened windows. A curtain twitched in the unit next door, but no one emerged. Just as he raised his fist for a third knock, the door cracked open, held by a security chain. Through the narrow gap, James saw Nathan's face, or what stress had made of it. The man who once commanded boardrooms with quiet confidence now looked haunted. Dark circles framed his eyes, and a scruffy beard shadowed his jaw. His hair, usually neatly combed, was disheveled, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Harper?" Nathan's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." "Nathan, we need to talk," James said, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Let me in. Whatever's going on, we can fix it." Nathan's eyes darted past James, scanning the parking lot. "No, you don't understand. Just let it go, please." His words were sharp, laced with a fear James had never heard from him. "Let it go?" James stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They're accusing you of stealing, Nathan. You and I both know that's impossible. Tell me what happened." For a fleeting moment, something flickered in Nathan's eyes, a desperate urge to speak. But then fear washed over him again, like a wave drowning a spark. "They're watching," he said, his voice trembling. "They know about my niece, her treatments. If I talk," he swallowed hard, gripping the doorframe. "Mr. Harper, forget about me. For your own safety, forget this ever happened." The door slammed shut, the chain rattling like a warning. James stood frozen, the folder heavy in his hands. In 15 years of running Harper Technologies, he'd never seen Nathan like this. The man he knew was unshuckable, the kind who'd once spent a weekend untangling a payroll glitch to ensure every employee was paid on time. What could terrify someone so principled into silence? And what did Nathan's niece have to do with it? James lingered on the doorstep, replaying Nathan's words. "They're watching. They know about my niece." He recalled a conversation from a company picnic last summer, Nathan beaming as he showed James a crayon drawing of a rainbow, a gift from his sister's daughter. The girl was sick, James remembered, something rare. Leukemia, maybe. Nathan had been helping with medical bills. Was that the leverage someone was using against him? He turned back toward his car, the wind biting at his face. The parking lot was still empty, but the shadows seemed to shift, as if hiding unseen eyes. As he slid into the driver's seat, his phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Got more on the restructuring. Call when you're clear." James started the engine, his mind churning. Nathan's fear, the board's secrecy, the too perfect evidence, all pointed to something far uglier than a single employee's dismissal. As he pulled onto the main road, headlights flared in his rearview mirror. A black SUV, its tinted windows opaque, eased out from a side street and settled behind him. James's grip tightened on the wheel. He took a left turn, then another, weaving through the quiet suburb. The SUV followed, keeping a steady distance. His heart thudded, not from fear, but from a growing certainty. Someone didn't want him digging into Nathan's case. He accelerated, merging onto the highway toward downtown. The SUV stayed with him for 2 more exits before peeling off into the night. James exhaled, but the relief was fleeting. Whoever was behind this had resources, vehicle, surveillance. Maybe even access to Nathan's personal life. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. Back in his office, the city lights twinkling beyond the glass. James spread the folder's contents across his desk. The termination papers were pristine, the kind of documents crafted to survive a lawsuit. But the transaction logs nagged at him. Several transfers, each under $10,000 to avoid regulatory flags, were time-stamped for times when Nathan's badge logs showed he was out of the building. Someone had gone to great lengths to frame him, but they'd been sloppy with the details. James leaned back, the leather chair creaking. He thought of Nathan's haunted face, the slammed door, the mention of his niece. Then he remembered a board meeting 6 months ago when Richard Langley had pushed to cut funding for the company's community health grants. Nathan had argued passionately against it, citing families like his sisters who relied on such programs. Langley had backed down, but his smile had been cold, calculated. Had that been the start of this? He picked up his phone and dialed Claire. "Claire, I need you to do something completely off the books." "Sir?" Her voice was steady, despite the late hour. "I need a new identity. I'm going undercover in my own company." The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. "Are you sure that's wise?" James glanced at the folder, then at the city beyond his window, its lights now seeming more like warnings than promises. "No," he admitted, "but it's necessary. Someone's using my company to destroy a good man's life. I'm going to find out who and why." As he hung up, the image of Nathan's fear-filled eyes lingered. James didn't know it yet, but that slammed door had opened a path into a conspiracy that would shake his company to its core and put his own life in the crosshairs. James Harper barely recognized the man staring back at him from the mirror of his downtown apartment. Gone was the tailored suit and polished demeanor of a Fortune 500 CEO. In their place stood Daniel Foster, a mid-level accountant with a slightly stooped posture, off-the-rack khakis, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses that pinched his nose. Claire Bennett had outdone herself, crafting a fake identity complete with a resume of unremarkable jobs at defunct firms and a driver's license that aged in 10 years. A subtle layer of makeup deepened the lines on his face, and a cheap leather briefcase completed the disguise. James tested a self-deprecating smile, the kind Daniel Foster might flash to avoid attention. It felt foreign, like wearing someone else's skin. Wednesday morning, he arrived at Harper Technologies headquarters, the same glass and steel monolith he'd walked into 1,000 times. But today, the lobby felt like a stage, every glance. From the security guards a spotlight. Carl, the veteran guard from Monday, gave him a cursory nod, no flicker of recognition in his eyes. James exhaled, clutching his briefcase tighter. The first hurdle was cleared, but the real test lay ahead, blending into a company he'd built while uncovering a conspiracy he'd failed to see. The employee orientation was surreal. James sat in a conference room with a dozen other new hires. Nodding along as a perky HR manager named Sandra ran through company policies he'd helped draft. The mission statement, "Innovation with Integrity," flashed on the screen, and James felt a pang of guilt. How had integrity slipped through his fingers? Sandra handed him a security badge, the photo showing Daniel Foster's tired eyes and thinning hair. "Welcome to the Financial Analysis Department," she said with a smile. "Though I should warn you, things are a bit unsettled right now." Unsettled was an understatement. When James reached his cubicle on the 14th floor, the air was thick with tension. Conversations hushed as he passed, and employees exchanged wary glances over the tops of their monitors. The Financial Analysis Department, once a hub of collaboration under Nathan Brooks, now felt like a battlefield after a rout. Desks were cluttered with half-packed boxes, and a whiteboard bore the scars of a hastily erased organizational chart. James settled into his chair, the hum of fluorescent lights and the clatter of keyboards filling the silence. He was no longer the CEO commanding the top floor. He was Daniel Foster, a nobody with basic access credentials and a dangerous mission. His desk neighbor, a young analyst named Emily Carter, offered a cautious smile. She was in her mid-20s, with sharp eyes and a stack of dog-eared notebooks on her desk. "You picked a wild time to start," she said, pushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm Emily. Welcome to the chaos." "Thanks," James replied, channeling Daniel's mild-mannered tone. "Daniel Foster." "What's with the chaos?" Emily glanced around before leaning closer. "Our old team leader, Nathan Brooks, got fired last week. They're saying he stole money, but anyone who worked with him knows that's nonsense. Now the whole department's being turned upside down, new bosses, new rules. It's like they're trying to erase him." James's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Sounds intense. Why the rush to change everything?" Emily hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on her coffee mug. "Let's just say asking questions isn't exactly encouraged right now." She lowered her voice. "Nathan built this amazing analysis tool. It flagged weird patterns in transactions. Last week, it went haywire, showing all these sketchy transfers. Next thing we know, he's gone, and we're told to ditch his tool." Before James could press further, a shadow fell over their cubicles. A senior manager, Mark Sullivan, strode past, his gaze lingering on Emily. She busied herself with her monitor, and James followed suit, opening a spreadsheet that meant nothing to him. But his mind was racing. Nathan's tool had found something big enough to get him fired and spark a department-wide purge. Over the next few hours, James navigated his role as Daniel Foster, running basic reports and keeping his head down. His limited credentials restricted him to low-level data, but even that revealed troubling patterns. Large transactions split into smaller ones, just below the threshold for regulatory scrutiny. Payments funneled through obscure subsidiaries, before vanishing into vendor accounts. It was clever, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. Nathan had known, and now James was starting to see it too. At lunch, Emily invited him to the break room, a sterile space with vending machines and a wilting ficus. As they picked at their sandwiches, she opened up further. "Nathan was like a mentor to me," she said, her voice soft. "When I started here, I was terrified of screwing up. He stayed late one night to walk me through a forecasting model, said I had potential. Now they're dragging his name through the mud, and I didn't even speak up." Her eyes glistened, and she looked away. James wanted to tell her Nathan was innocent, that he was fighting for him, but Daniel Foster couldn't afford to break cover. Instead, he said, "Sounds like he was a good guy. Maybe the truth will come out." "Maybe," Emily said, unconvinced. She glanced at the door as Mark Sullivan entered, his presence silencing their conversation. Mark grabbed a soda, his eyes scanning the room before settling on James. "New guy, right? Don't work too hard. You'll burn out." His smile was friendly, but his tone carried a warning. After lunch, James took a calculated risk. During a quiet moment, he accessed a shared drive, searching for traces of Nathan's analysis tool. Most of its files had been deleted, but a forgotten backup lingered in an archived folder. He opened it, and a simple interface loaded, mapping transaction patterns in a web of glowing lines. One cluster caught his eye, a series of transfers to a vendor called Blue Horizon Consulting, a name that appeared nowhere in the company's official records. Before he could dig deeper, a hand tapped his shoulder. "Working late already, Foster?" It was Lucas Hayes, the IT specialist Emily had mentioned with a shudder. Lean and sharp-eyed, Lucas had a reputation for fixing problems and creating them. His smile was all teeth. "Just running diagnostics?" "Something like that," James said, closing the program with a casual click. His heart pounded. Had Lucas seen the screen? "Careful with those old files," Lucas said, adjusting his glasses. "Some things are better left buried." He lingered, a moment too long before walking away, his footsteps echoing in the near-empty office. James waited until Lucas was gone, then shut down his computer. The encounter had been too close. He needed to move faster, but he also needed allies. Emily's honesty and quiet defiance made her a potential partner, but trusting her meant risking his cover. As he packed up, a janitor mopping the hallway caught his eye Tom Reynolds, a grizzled former cop who'd worked at Harper Technologies for years. Tom gave him a subtle nod, as if he knew more than he let on. James filed it away. In a company full of secrets, even the maintenance crew might hold answers. As he rode the elevator down, the weight of his disguise pressed harder. He wasn't just Daniel Foster, accountant. He was James Harper, a man who'd let his company drift into darkness. The truth was out there, hidden in deleted files and whispered warnings. But finding it meant walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could bring it all crashing down. The neon sign of the Neptune Diner flickered in the pre-dawn gloom, casting a sickly green glow over the cracked parking lot. Tucked between rusting warehouses in San Francisco's industrial district, the diner was a relic of a bygone era, grease-stained menus, chipped Formica counters, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. James Harper, still cloaked in the guise of Daniel Foster, pulled his jacket tighter against the 4 a.m. chill. His burner phone had buzzed at 2:47 a.m. with a cryptic message. Neptune Diner, 4 a.m. Come alone. Sit at the counter. Order coffee. Black. The number was blocked, but James knew it was Nathan Brooks. After weeks of dead ends, Nathan was finally ready to talk, or so James hoped. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee and frying bacon. A lone waitress, her gray hair pinned in a loose bun, shuffled behind the counter, her eyes heavy with the weight of too many night shifts. 2 truckers hunched over their plates in a corner booth, their voices a low murmur. James slid onto a stool at the counter, the red vinyl creaking under his weight. "Coffee, Black," he said, keeping his tone neutral. The waitress poured it without a word, the dark liquid steaming in a chipped mug. James stared into it, his reflection distorted, and waited. At 4:15 a.m., a figure slipped onto a stool 2 seats away. The man wore a hoodie, his face shadowed by a baseball cap pulled low. It took James a moment to recognize Nathan, his appearance altered by dyed blonde hair and thick-framed glasses that screamed disguise. "Don't look at me directly," Nathan muttered, pretending to study a laminated menu. "They have people everywhere. Order something else so we can talk." James signaled for eggs, and the waitress ambled away, leaving them in relative privacy. He kept his eyes on his coffee, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found your analysis tool, Nathan. It's brilliant. Those patterns it flagged blue. Horizon Consulting, the split transactions. What did it uncover?" Nathan's hands trembled as he wrapped them around his own mug, untouched. "It wasn't supposed to find what it did. I built it to optimize operations, spot inefficiencies. Instead, it uncovered a cancer." He paused, glancing at the diner's grimy windows, as if expecting eyes in the darkness. 2 months ago, it flagged discrepancies in international wire transfers, small amounts. Insignificant on their own, but they added up to millions. I thought it was a glitch. Then I traced them to shell companies, all leading to a holding corporation in the Cayman Islands. James's pulse quickened. Who's behind it? Nathan pulled out his phone, tilting the screen so only James could see. A diagram glowed faintly, a web of interconnected nodes. "Richard Langley sits on the holding company's board, along with half our senior management. They've been running this for years, maybe even before you bought the company. But that's not the worst part." The waitress returned with James's eggs, the plate clattering on the counter. They waited until she retreated before Nathan continued, his voice dropping lower. "The embezzlement's just the surface. They're using Harper Technologies to launder money for some very dangerous people, criminal syndicates, maybe worse. The legitimate business is a front, a clean pipeline for dirty cash. James's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. He'd built Harper Technologies to innovate, to solve problems, not to bankroll criminals. That's why they came after you so fast. Nathan nodded, his eyes hollow. The night before they fired me, I was verifying my findings. Someone from I to Lucas Hayes showed up, said they needed to install a security patch. I didn't think twice. But they planted something else, a program that gave them access to my computer. They didn't just delete my files. They dug through everything: personal emails, photos, my sister's medical bills. His voice cracked. They found leverage. Leverage? James pressed, though he dreaded the answer. My niece, Ellie. She's 6, fighting leukemia. The treatments are experimental, expensive. I've been covering the loans. Langley made it clear. If I talk, those loans get called in. My sister loses everything, and Ellie. He couldn't finish, his fingers tightening around the mug until his knuckles whitened. James's fist clenched under the counter. That's not why you're still silent, is it? Nathan's gaze flicked to the windows again, his voice barely audible. A week after they fired me, a man showed up at Ellie's hospital room. Never said a word, just stood in the doorway for 5 minutes, staring. Then he left. Message received. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, amplifying the silence between them. James's mind raced. This wasn't just corporate greed. It was a calculated campaign of terror. We need proof, he said. Something they can't erase. There might be something, Nathan whispered. Before they locked me out, I sent one encrypted file to a secure server, Project Sentinel. It's got everything. The shell companies, the transfers, the names. But I couldn't access it. Again, they were watching too closely. It's still there, buried in the backup archive, server room B, terminal 7. You'll need high-level clearance to get it. James nodded, committing the details to memory. Anything else I should know? B. Careful of Lucas Hayes, Nathan said. He's their enforcer in I-T. Brilliant, but he enjoys the dirty work too much. And check the maintenance logs for the executive elevator 3 months back. Something happened that night, something they covered up fast. It might explain why so many executives fell in line with Langley. A truck's headlights swept across the diner, and Nathan stiffened. I have to go. They follow me sometimes. He stood, tossing cash for his untouched coffee. One more thing, Mr. Harper Daniel, whatever you're calling yourself. If you see a black SUV more than once a day, they're onto you. And whatever you do, don't trust. His words cut off as 2 men in dark suits entered, their eyes scanning the room. Nathan slipped out the back exit before they could spot him. The door creaking shut. James lingered over his cold eggs, his heart pounding. The men ordered coffee and sat in a booth, their postures too rigid for casual diners. He paid his bill, avoiding their gaze, and stepped into the parking lot. The air was colder now, the sky bruising with the first hints of dawn. As he drove away, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. A black SUV pulled out from a side street, its headlights dark, but its presence unmistakable. It followed him for 3 blocks before turning off, leaving a chill that settled deep in his bones. Back at his apartment, James sat in the dark, the burner phone heavy in his hand. Nathan's words echoed. Project Sentinel, server room B, terminal 7. The elevator logs. Don't trust. Who? Langley? Lucas? Someone higher? The conspiracy was bigger than he'd imagined, a network of corruption woven into the very fabric of his company. But Nathan's fear, the threat to his niece, had lit a fire in James. He wasn't just fighting for Harper Technologies anymore. He was fighting for the people who trusted him to lead. He opened his laptop, pulling up the maintenance logs Claire had sent earlier. The executive elevator records for 3 months ago were missing, replaced by a single entry: routine maintenance. No issues. Too clean. Too convenient. James closed the laptop, his decision made. Tomorrow, he'd find a way into server room B, but first, he needed to know who was driving that SUV and what they'd buried in that elevator. The server room was a labyrinth of cold steel and humming machines, its air thick with the sterile chill of climate control. James Harper, still disguised as Daniel Foster, slipped inside during the graveyard shift, his stolen maintenance badge granting him access past the biometric locks. The cavernous space was lit only by the eerie glow of server racks, their blinking lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Cables snaked across the floor like veins, and the low drone of cooling fans filled the silence. James's breath caught in his throat as he navigated the narrow aisles, his cheap loafers silent on the polished concrete. Server Room B, Terminal 7. Nathan's encrypted file, Project Sentinel, was here, the key to unraveling the conspiracy poisoning Harper Technologies. But every second in this room felt like a gamble with his life. He'd planned meticulously, timing his entry for 2 a.m. when the building was nearly deserted. Claire had forged the badge, and Tom Reynolds, the veteran security guard, had tipped him off about a blind spot in the hallway cameras. But the memory of Nathan's warning at the Neptune Diner, "Be careful of Lucas Hayes," gnawed at him. Lucas, the IT enforcer with a predator's smile, was the wild card. James clutched a USB drive in his pocket, ready to extract the file. If he could get in and out undetected, he'd have the evidence to bring down Richard Langley and his network of corruption. Terminal 7 was tucked in a corner, its monitor casting a blue glow over a cluttered desk. James powered it up, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The login screen demanded high-level credentials, but Claire had slipped him a temporary admin code, lifted from an unguarded IT log. He typed it in, holding his breath. The screen flashed green access granted. A directory labeled Backup Archives appeared, and there, buried in a maze of folders, was Project Sentinel. James inserted the USB, initiating the transfer. The progress bar crept forward. 10%, 20%. A soft click echoed behind him. James froze, his hand hovering over the keyboard. Footsteps, deliberate and unhurried, approached from the shadows. "Working late, Foster?" Lucas Hayes' voice cut through the hum of the servers, smooth and mocking. "Or should I say, Mr. Harper?" James's heart slammed against his ribs, but he turned slowly, feigning confusion. Lucas stood in the aisle, his lean frame silhouetted against the server lights. His glasses glinted, and a smirk played on his lips. "Running diagnostics," James said, his voice steady. "Standard procedure." Lucas chuckled, stepping closer. "At 2 a.m.? Funny thing about diagnostics, they leave logs. Just like elevator maintenance records." He tilted his head, studying James like a specimen. "You've been poking around, haven't you? Old security footage, Nathan's files, and now this. I'm impressed, but you're out of your depth." James's mind raced. The USB was at 50%. He needed to stall. "I'm just doing my job, Hayes. Maybe you should do yours and fix the network glitches." Lucas's smirk vanished. "Don't play dumb. Daniel Foster doesn't exist. But you know what does? Hidden camera footage of your little diner meeting with Brooks." He tapped his phone, and a grainy video played. James and Nathan at the Neptune Diner, their heads bent in conversation. "Sloppy Harper, a fake beard and glasses? You thought that'd fool us?" Before James could respond, the server room door hissed open. Richard Langley strode in, flanked by 2 security guards in dark suits, their builds screaming ex-military. Langley's polished appearance, crisp suits, silver cufflinks felt jarringly out of place in the tech dungeon. "Well done, Lucas," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "I had a feeling our curious new employee would try something like this. Though I must admit, Harper, I expected better tradecraft from a man of your stature." James stood, the USB now at 80%. He needed 10 more seconds. "You're the one who should be worried, Langley. I know about the shell companies, the Cayman accounts. You're using my company to launder money for criminals." Langley laughed, perching on the edge of a desk. "Criminals? Such an ugly word. They're businessmen, James, wealthy, powerful men who value discretion. Thanks to my innovative financing, Harper Technologies has thrived. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you for blackmailing my board?" James shot back, remembering Nathan's hint about the executive elevator. "What happened 3 months ago, Langley? What did you do to them?" Langley's smile tightened. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. The elevator was a convenient stage. Private conversations, compromising situations, all recorded for posterity. 7 of our 9 board members saw the wisdom of cooperation. The holdouts? Well, ask Margaret Evans about her son's gambling debts, or David Foster about his hidden offshore accounts. The USB hit 100%, and James yanked it free, slipping it into his pocket. But the guards moved to flank him, their hands resting on concealed holsters. Langley continued, undeterred. You could have stayed ignorant, enjoyed the profits. Instead, you played detective. Now you force my hand." He nodded to Lucas. "Initiate the attack sequence." Lucas's fingers flew across a keyboard, pulling up a new set of files. "Your private accounts, corporate holdings, real. Estate by morning, you'll be bankrupt and under investigation for the very crimes you're chasing. The SEC's already got an anonymous tip about your decades-long fraud." James's stomach churned. They'd orchestrated a perfect frame, using his own systems against him. But Nathan's words from the diner flashed in his mind. Project Sentinel. The elevator logs. He scanned Lucas's screens, spotting a faint trace of Nathan's analysis. Tool running in the background, still mapping transactions. It was his last card to play. "Before you do this," James said, locking eyes with Langley, "check your Cayman accounts." "Right now." Langley's composure cracked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Check them," he snapped at Lucas. The IT specialist's fingers hesitated, then typed furiously. His eyes widened. "Sir, there's an automated program running. It's transferring everything millions through thousands of microtransactions. I can't stop it. It's adapting." James allowed himself a small smile. Interesting thing about Nathan's tool. It doesn't just track transactions. With a tweak, it can replicate them. Right now, it's redistributing your dirty money to transparent accounts monitored by international authorities. "You're bluffing," Langley snarled, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" "Check account XJ279. Lucas pulled it up, his face paling. "It's empty. Everything's gone." Langley grabbed Lucas's chair. "How did you?" "I didn't," James said. "You did. Every time you moved money, accessed compromised files, Nathan's tool was learning, building a blueprint of your operation. I just activated it during my diagnostics last week." Langley's face contorted with rage. "Kill the servers. Won't help," James said. "It's self-replicating, broadcasting to secure servers beyond your reach. In 3 minutes, every transaction you've made in 5 years will be with the authorities." Lucas interrupted, his voice frantic. "He's right. It's spreading. We can't stop it." Langley pulled a gun from his jacket, its barrel glinting in the server room's glow. "You think you've won?" A disgraced CEO, desperate after. His fraud was exposed. A new voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that." Emily Carter stood in the doorway, holding her phone aloft, its camera streaming live. Claire Bennett stepped in behind her tablet displaying multiple video feeds. "Building security might be compromised," Claire said, "but the independent cameras I installed last month, they're working perfectly." Langley's hand trembled, the gun wavering. "You're working together? Did you think I'd come here without a plan?" James asked. "You were so focused on your schemes you missed the obvious. The loyal assistant, the curious analyst, the staff who've been watching you." Emily's voice was steady. "We're not alone. There are dozens more you overlooked. People you thought were too small to matter." Claire's tablet chimed. "FBI's entering the building. Real FBI, not your bought and paid for friends." "Impossible," Lucas whispered, but a new voice crackled through the server room speakers. "Nathan Brooks, did you forget who designed your security systems? I've been hiding in the network for weeks, waiting for this." The guards stepped back, hands raised, as footsteps thundered in the corridor. Langley swung the gun toward James, his mask of control shattering. "You ruined everything." Three things happened at once. Emily shouted a warning, Claire threw her tablet, and James dove behind a server rack. The gun fired, the bullet puncturing a cooling line. Water sprayed, sparks flew, and alarms blared as Langley bolted for the emergency exit only to slam into a wall of tactical gear and raised rifles. "Federal agents, drop the weapon." James crouched in the chaos, the USB burning a hole in his pocket. The truth was out, but the cost was still unfolding. And somewhere in the flickering screens, Project Sentinel was rewriting the future. Dawn broke over San Francisco, painting the skyline in shades of gold and amber. From the top-floor office of Harper Technologies, James Harper watched the city awaken, its lights fading as the sun climbed. The chaos of the night before blaring. Alarms, federal agents swarming the server room, Richard Langley's snarling defiance felt like a fever dream. But the weight of the USB drive in his pocket, containing Project Sentinel's damning evidence, anchored him to reality. The conspiracy that had festered in his company was exposed, but the cost was still unfolding, and the path forward was uncertain. The server room had become a crime scene, cordoned off by FBI technicians in hazmat-like suits, their laptops humming, as they sifted through digital wreckage. Langley and Lucas Hayes were gone, led away in handcuffs, their polished facades crumbling under the weight of their crimes. The two security guards, mercenaries hired by Langley's special investors, had turned on each other, spilling secrets in hopes of leniency. But the real victory wasn't in the arrests. It was in the unlikely coalition that had brought them down. Claire Bennett, Emily Carter, Nathan Brooks, and a quiet army of employees who'd refused to be silenced. James's office, once a sanctuary of control, now felt like a battlefield. Papers littered his desk, and the air smelled faintly of ozone from the server room's ruptured cooling line. He was no longer Daniel Foster, the accountant who'd slipped through the shadows. He was James Harper, CEO, forced to confront the rot he'd let grow under his watch. The guilt was a dull ache, tempered only by the courage of those who'd risked everything to save his company. The door opened, and Nathan Brooks stepped in, his dyed blonde hair and glasses gone, replaced by the familiar neat comb-over and tired but determined eyes. Behind him was Margaret Evans, a board member whose poised exterior hid a steely resolve. Her presence was a surprise, given Langley's claim that she'd been blackmailed over her son's gambling debts. She placed a thick folder on James's desk, its edges worn from years of careful handling. "You're probably wondering why I called this meeting," Margaret said, her voice calm but weighted. "There's something you need to see before the FBI sweeps everything." James opened the folder, his breath catching. Inside were documents spanning 3 years, private emails, bank statements, and a meticulous record of Langley's operations shell companies, wire transfers, even coded communications with his investors. It was a shadow ledger of the conspiracy, more comprehensive than anything Project Sentinel had uncovered. "You've been gathering this all along," James realized, looking up at Margaret. She nodded, her silver hair catching the morning light. "After the elevator incident 3 months ago, when Langley thought he'd blackmailed us all, I knew we needed a long-term strategy. Some board members caved to his threats, fear, greed, shame. But others, like me, played along while documenting everything. The gambling debts he mentioned? A lie. My son works for Interpol's Financial Crimes Unit. We've been building this case for years, but we needed someone on the inside to trigger Langley's exposure." Nathan leaned against the wall, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "That's why you warned me to run when they came after me," he said to Margaret. "You knew I'd be more valuable in the shadows and alive." "Exactly," Margaret said, her tone grim. "Langley's investors have eliminated whistleblowers in other companies. We couldn't risk losing you. When you found the fraud, independently, it forced our hand, accelerated the timeline." A knock interrupted them. Claire entered, her tablet glowing with live news feeds. Headlines scrolled past. "Corporate conspiracy exposed at Harper Technologies, International. Money laundering ring busted. FBI raids multiple financial institutions." "It's not just us," Claire said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Langley's arrest triggered a domino effect. Law enforcement is moving on targets across 3 continents. Those special investors are falling, one by one." James studied the reports, recognition dawning. The timing, the coordinated raids, it wasn't chance. "This was planned," he said. "All of it. Operation Glasshouse," Margaret confirmed. 3 years of work by Interpol, the FBI, and others. Your company was their crown jewel, their most sophisticated operation. But we needed a catalyst, someone they wouldn't suspect, someone who could expose them from within. Nathan cracked a faint smile. "When you went undercover, Margaret's son saw the opportunity. They held back, let you draw Langley out while they positioned the pieces." The door opened again, and Emily Carter entered, followed by a group of unfamiliar faces: accountants, IT staff, even a janitor named Lila Morgan, who'd quietly photographed Langley's discarded documents after hours. They carried folders, flash drives, and laptops, their expressions a mix of defiance and hope. "More evidence," Emily announced. "We weren't the only ones keeping records." People across the company noticed discrepancies, hushed. Meetings. They were just waiting for a chance to come forward. "The real heroes," Nathan said softly, his voice thick. "The ones who chose to do the right thing despite the risks." James looked at the growing crowd in his office. There, faces illuminated by the rising sun. There was Tom Reynolds, the security guard who tipped him off about the cameras. Lila, whose late-night snapshots had filled gaps in the evidence. And countless others, from data entry clerks to analysts, who'd quietly fought corruption. In their own ways. Their collective courage humbled him, a stark contrast to his own detachment. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Margaret smiled, a rare warmth in her eyes. "Now we rebuild. The board members who sided with Langley have resigned. We'll appoint new leadership, people committed to transparency. Starting with this." She handed him a document outlining a complete restructuring, independent oversight, enhanced whistleblower protections, direct channels for reporting concerns. Claire added a second file. "And this, a new governance model to prevent this from happening again. Open books, regular audits, no more shadows." Nathan stepped forward, opening his laptop. "One more thing. I've rebuilt my analysis tool, open source now, so any company can use it to spot fraud before it starts. It's my way of making sure this isn't just our fight." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Through the glass walls, they watched FBI agents escorting the last of Langley's conspirators. Lucas Hayes shuffled past, head bowed. His technical brilliance now turned to cutting a deal with prosecutors. Margaret placed a final document on the desk. The board's first unanimous decision in months. Nathan Brooks is appointed Chief Technology Officer with a mandate to build a department focused on corporate ethics and compliance. Nathan blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," James said, a smile breaking through his exhaustion. "We need people like you, all of you, to make sure this never happens again." As the sun climbed higher, more employees gathered, sharing stories and ideas for reform. What had begun as a conspiracy had sparked a movement, led by those Langley had dismissed as insignificant. Later that afternoon, James stood with Nathan at the window, watching news vans disperse below. "You know," Nathan said, "when this started, I thought I was alone. That's what they wanted us to think." "But you weren't," James said, gesturing to the bustling office behind them. "Real change happens when people stand together, when they refuse to be silenced." Nathan grinned, a spark of his old self returning. "Speaking of change, Ellie's doctors say her latest treatment is working. And that new pediatric wing at the hospital? It'll help a lot of families. Very anonymous." James winked. "Very anonymous." As evening fell, James gathered his team old allies and knew for a final meeting. Together, they charted a course not just for recovery, but for transformation. Harper Technologies would become a model of ethical leadership, a testament to the power of ordinary people choosing truth over fear. The conspiracy was dead, but its defeat had forged bonds that would shape the future. This story is more than a corporate thriller. It's a celebration of the human spirit. At its core, it's about the courage of individuals James, Nathan, Emily, Claire, and countless unsung employees who refuse to bow to corruption, even at great personal risk. It reminds us that integrity isn't a policy. It's a choice made daily in small acts of defiance and solidarity. The humanism shines in the collective strength of those deemed insignificant by the powerful, proving that real change begins with the willingness to stand up, speak out, and support one another. The lessons are timeless. Trust must be earned through transparency, not assumed through authority. Leaders, like James, must stay connected to their teams, lest they lose sight of what matters. And most importantly, no one is truly powerless when they act together. Whether it's a janitor snapping photos or an analyst preserving data, every action counts in the fight for justice. If this story resonated with you, join us at Legacy Stories for more tales of courage, redemption, and the triumph of the human spirit. Subscribe to our channel to never miss a story that inspires and challenges the way you see the world. Together, let's celebrate the legacies that shape a better future.